Hello everybody, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to my Module 5 discussion. Today we're talking about communication between internal stakeholders. So, recall incidents you faced in a workplace that involve communication that either worked well or horribly. Describe the incidents, then apply at least 3 of the key perspectives of this chapter to your incident. How might applying information in this chapter have improved the outcomes? I'd like to list 3 experiences I had and apply a concept from the chapter to each one and see if with this knowledge I could have done things differently. So I have had several experiences in the workplace that are related to the topics in chapter 5, going back pretty far in my history, so that now I can claim that I've gotten better with communication. I was working pretty far from home with another guy, and we would report in to our supervisor once a week with our stats. So that's the numbers that we had achieved for that week. We were both having a rough time. We were losing interest in doing the work and wanted to quit before our contract was up. So instead, we just got into the habit of reporting false numbers and saying, everything is fine here over the phone. This is an illustration of employee silence from page 120 or 216, where we intentionally withheld information from our supervisor that could have been useful or fixable. We could have expressed our attitudes about the work and maybe gotten some counseling. We could have been reassigned or even just fired, although it was a volunteer job. And at the time, I think we were beyond wanting counseling or any reassignment, so we were just resigned to quietly waiting out our time. I don't think our direct supervisor was to blame for this, because this attitude came purely from ourselves, and he was a good guy. He didn't shoot us down or give us dirty looks or give any bad feedback or pressure. But as the authors describe it, there was nothing that the supervisor was doing to shut us down. It was all us. It may have been more about our shame of not fitting in with the culture of high motivation and success instead of any organizational factors. Another situation in my past that I have hopefully overcome at this point is my personal management style, where I literally said to my team, anything you say besides yes means no. I'm a little ashamed to say that, but at the time it made sense. So I expected my subordinates to positively comply with what I was telling them to do. It was me, and I said it. It made sense at the time and it seemed appropriate. However, it's clear that I was shutting down dissent or upward criticism. To be fair to myself, I was communicating downward that they had to follow the priorities I gave them and attain a necessary level of proficiency in their work. So this was job rationale and indoctrination from pages 206 to 207. I felt they were being unresourceful and obstinate. At the time, I didn't believe they had any constructive criticism to add. And by dissenting, I believed I was experienced enough to know the most effective ways to get the job done. Of course, from this perspective, it sounds a little like Cobra Kai Sensei in Karate Kid instead of Mr. Miyagi. The authors would say that I was shutting down upward dissent and criticism from page 222, and that it would cause a lot more apprehension and withdrawal of trust from the employees instead of making them more loyal. But I don't care. Yet another situation, coincidentally at the same company, was where my supervisor encouraged me to be callous and adversarial to my subordinates, because by his management philosophy, they would band together in camaraderie to hate me as their common enemy. It would bring them all together for a common purpose. Fortunately, I didn't take his advice very far, and I recognized it as toxic leadership style. And despite the previous example I just gave you, Again, his advice was to disengage from opening channels of upward communication and to push them back to lateral descent. They could only complain to themselves and let off steam criticizing their boss with each other. Next, apply Mishra's take on grapevines to your organizational experiences. I've been in organizations that were upper level, where the upper level big decisions seemed to drag on a long time, such as whether someone was going to be hired to help alleviate the workload or whether some space would open up to help us manage equipment storage. In many cases, it seemed like news about these developments would travel through the grapevine. Sometimes it was accurate and insightful, but usually it was speculative. So the book talks about this on page 243 as informal communication, a network that functions outside of the organizational hierarchy. Mishra's 1990 study asserted that grapevine networks are a standard part of life as the fastest, most unfiltered way of getting news. There's an estimate there in that study that 70% of information travels via grapevine, but from what I've seen, it's much higher. And I don't mean the amount of information, it's more like the actual news we get is very minimal, so it takes rumor and grapevine for any news to pass along. So the grapevine or water cooler communications happen on a lateral level and outside of the official channels. The news may seem to be more credible since the information may be firsthand, at least within a few degrees of separation, and you can trust the reports are credible since they're from within the same environment. The information is often about personal matters of coworkers or about policy changes or situational impacts on the organization. That information is usually not meant to be manipulative or hurtful, and is often relevant and timely. Often the official communication networks can't go ahead with reporting on these matters until the timing is right, until they've got the liabilities in order, until they make sure that they've got their facts straight, let's say. Still, it's useful for coworkers to get a heads up if a round of layoffs is on its way, if the CEO is introducing new rules, or if Bob and Susan in accounting are breaking up or getting back together again. Okay, how does understanding networking within an organization benefit or harm an organization? Think Brass. Okay, Daniel Brass, 1995, created 3 categories and several metrics for each category for analyzing communication networks on page 250. They are the measurement of ties, being communicative relationships, measures assigned to, on the micro level, individual actors, and measures assigned to the macro level networks as a whole. This is a huge topic in itself. I won't drag this on to 20 minutes, try to keep it to 10 minutes. So, without going into too much depth, these categories dissect the micro and macro levels of the networks. Just as the machinery on an assembly line or the telephone lines at a call center, it seems that an organization should recognize the function of communication networks as vital to its operation. That means getting to know who is good or bad at passing on accurate information, where the news is traveling, which people have the most clout, the most connections, and then knowing what formal and informal channels there are within your organization, and then not trying to subvert or work around it, but work with it, control it, or make it to your advantage. This communication is not just for official policy or indoctrination. It's about the upward, downward, lateral communication we covered earlier in the chapter. Recognize the communication influencers, stars, gossipers, and instructionists, obstructionists in our organization can help mindful managers to tend to handling or spinning misinformation. They keep feedback channels open and promote a culture where communication is welcomed and valued, although that is kind of idealistic. The inverse happens, however, where upward communication and criticism gets shut down. Employees can only vent to each other, and it ceases to be a force propelling the organization together in the same direction. It's like paddlers going in different directions. All right, I've enjoyed sharing with you, and I look forward to your comments. Bye for now.